All right, everyone. So I will tell you a story. If you could, Abba, if you could, let's turn this off one second. Because your picture comes up on this thing, you understand? So it comes up. If you could take, one second, let me get this thing over. Oh, there we go. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. It won't be good. All right, story. This is a story of Rabbi Mendel Futerfas, very famous Chabad Hasid. I knew him like pretty well. We used to learn in the morning. He was in Russia. He passed away like 30 years ago. He was in Russia and he was put into Siberia for helping Jews. He was very, very active, even in the time of communist Russia, and securing money for the underground yeshivas and for helping people, and did a tremendous risk to his own self. And finally, they caught him. Then they put him into prison. I don't know if it was 7 years or 5 years, but even one day was too much. So here's one of the stories that I heard. I did not hear the story from him, but I heard the story about him. That when he was in Siberia, so they would work, they were cutting down forests. They would chop down wood, cutting down forests. But when the nighttime came, so they wouldn't work. They didn't want them outside because they were afraid that people would run away, or they couldn't see very well. Also, there would be accidents. Anyway, so they would lock them up in their barracks, and that's why they had to stay in the barracks. So anyway, however it was, they got to the point where it's to avoid, just boredom and all the negative things that come along with boredom. So they decided to tell stories. So one of the people that told the story was a deep sea diver. There were 3 stories that I heard of: the deep sea diver, and the other one was the tightrope walker, which I think I told you, and the other one was the Cossack's horse, which maybe I'll tell that on Friday. But here's the story of the deep sea diver. So when Stalin took over, the communism set in, so everybody that was loyal to the Tsar got thrown into prison or to one of these concentration camps or work camps, gulags. A lot of these people were, soldiers. They were soldiers, people that were soldiers. They had medals. I knew a couple people from Kfar Chabad that they had been soldiers in the Tsar's army, and they were loyal to the Tsar. And they came, proudly wearing their medals, and because of that, they were thrown into. You're loyal to the Tsar, so they threw them into a prison. So one of the people that was there claimed that he had been a deep sea diver, for the Tsar's navy. The Tsar was very proud of his navy, even though it was terrible. I mean, they lost almost all their battles, but he was very, very proud of the navy. So he was a deep sea diver. What did a deep sea diver do? They didn't have, tanks that they dive down deep. They used to be a deep sea diver. He put on a suit, a diving suit, and there was just a window, a glass window, and there was a tube, a big tube that was attached from the back of his suit or wherever it was to the ship, and people would pump. There were people that would pump air down, and he could go down. Why did they have to have a deep sea diver for? Because sometimes ships would sink. Sometimes ships would sink. They would get sunk. They would hit a reef or something. They would get sunk. So when they would sink, so the ship was very valuable. It had a lot of metal on it, and also the machines that were on it, and things, and the guns that were on it. So they had to have somebody to go and fix up the ships. I guess also to fix up the ships from under, whatever. There was other reasons, but that was one of his jobs as a deep sea diver. So he said that they would lower the deep sea divers down, 2 of them, and they would put like a big hook on the front of the ship and on the back of the ship. And I guess there was a special place where you would put it. And then they would be situated above the sunken ship. There would be 2 ships on the ocean, And they would situate themselves above this, and they would, with cranks, they would pull up these two chains and lift up the ship. Now, meanwhile, Rav Mendel is hearing this, everything Rav Mendel saw and everything he heard, as he tried to figure out what type of a lesson he can learn from this to be more positive, to serve God more positively, just to keep alive, just to keep active. And not only that, the fact is that everything that happens in the world is a lesson to us how to be more positive in life and how to serve the Creator better, everything there is. But for those people in Siberia, it was life and death, because, if you didn't think positively, you got thought negatively, then you were finished. Then you were finished. All of a sudden you felt the cold, you felt this. There was tens of causes of death over there. The hunger and anti-Semitism and diseases and overwork. Anyway, so here's this. So he says that the deep sea diver says, but sometimes what happened is that sometimes the ship would be under the ocean, the sunken ship. If it had been there like for, I don't know, a month or however, so the deep sea divers would go down, they would put these hooks on. The two ships that were on the surface of the ocean, they would pull it up, and because it started rusting, the ship started rusting, so it wasn't so secure, and the two hooks would separate. They would just take a little part of the ship up and they would break. So meanwhile, there were all the guns and all the things down there that had not been affected so much by the rust. How could they lift the ship up? This is the deep sea divers telling, right? So he says somebody developed a method that they would take a big, huge rubber mat, the size of the ship that had sunk. They would take a huge mat, and the bottom was a very thick rubber. It was like two layers of rubber. The bottom layer was thick rubber, the top layer, and between those two layers was a plate of iron, of thin iron, and from that iron was hanging like hundreds of hooks, hundreds of chains, and at the end of each chain would be a hook. Hundreds and hundreds of chains, there would be a hook. And they would lower this, they would spread the mat on the ocean over the sunken ship. Then they would lower the mat down, and the two deep sea divers would go down and they would hook these hundreds and hundreds of hooks to the sunken ship wherever they could. And then they would inflate the mat. And when they would inflate the mat would help to equally disperse the energy of these two ships above, and it would lift it up, help lift up the sunken ship, and it would lift it up, and then they could take it into the harbor or wherever it was, and remove the usable parts. Good. So Rav Mendel heard the story, and he said, I could not figure out what in the world this story has to teach me about serving God. Couldn't figure it out. And so Rav Mendel said that this was at a Verbringen. I was not at the Verbringen. Rabbi Mendel, I think he started working in the Shiva in like in Kfar Chabad in like 1972 or something, 73. So he said when he heard that the Rebbe came out very shortly before the 6-day war, the Rebbe came out with this idea of putting tefillin on everybody, called Mivtza Tefillin. And the Mivtza Tefillin, what's it called? To put on tefillin, mission tefillin. That to try to put tefillin on every single Jew. And the Chabad Hasidim, especially in the land of Israel, they spread out and they put tefillin on everybody as much as they could. They went into the army bases and that was like that unheard of, because Israel was like a very like officially non-religious place. To a certain degree, it was officially anti-religious place, but they just let the religious people in there because there was a lot of religion. Anyway, but the Rebbe said, go and ask people to put on tefillin, and that's what they did. They put on tefillin. So Rav Mendel said, as soon as the Rebbe said to do that, he went out and he also helped, to ask people to put on tefillin in the streets. Said suddenly he realized the meaning of that story. What's the meaning of the story? The Jewish people are like the sunken ship under the water, and the rust has separated each one from the other. Jews have lost their Jewish identity. They don't feel they're part of the same ship. So what's the Rebbe going to do? The Rebbe is going to lower this big, huge mat down, all of his Hasidim, and they're going to hook on to every single Jew, put tefillin on them. Hundreds, thousands of Jews are going to have little hooks on them. Then when Mashiach comes, when the mat gets blown up, expanded, so then inflated, then it'll lift up everyone, whoop, and it'll lift all the Jews up together, and that's what Mashiach is going to do. So now we're just hooking all of the Jews up together, and when the Rebbe reveals himself, then it's not going to be hard. The whole thing is going to be elevated with Mashiach now. That's today's story. Have a good day with Mashiach now. Have a happy holiday tomorrow. God willing, we'll see each other on Friday, again, on Friday, 8:15 in the morning. Shalom uvracha. Chag Sameach.